So I had a patient just tell me that she went in for a pacemaker, and she's been a long-term patient, but during COVID, she got pretty nervous, kind of watching the news quite a bit, and just, how many of you know if you're watching the news all the time, you're going to get a little bit anxious? Yes. And she had a heart rate monitor on for several months to monitor her heart, and they came back because she had fainting spells. She had difficulty breathing, and everything was kind of pointing to her heart. Comes back and they say, well, it doesn't look like anything's wrong with your heart, but we have this pacemaker surgery scheduled anyway. And so we do think this is going to improve your fainting and your inability to sleep, and it's going to keep your energy level up. So they went ahead and did the surgery, and she just comes in actually today, and she said, Dr. Nick, I didn't know that I was going to have to be on this medication for the rest of my life. And I said, what do you mean a medication for the rest of your life? And she said, well, they're giving me a medication to regulate my heart rate. And I said, isn't that what the pacemaker is supposed to do? And she said, they say that this is going to help regulate the heart rate and that it'll help the pacemaker work better. And she said, I also didn't know that my blood pressure being low was that big of a deal. They also are raising my blood pressure, and now I'm going to be on that one for the rest of my life too. They sent her home with a couple things. I'm going to read this to you about elevated blood pressure, and again, she had low blood pressure, but they sent her home with elevated blood pressure. Home care instructions, and it says this: if you're diagnosed with high blood pressure, work with your medical doctor to make a long-term plan to manage it. And what do you think a long-term plan to manage it means medically? Medication. For how long? The rest of your life. And so tonight we're going to get into the kind of the why behind maybe a different way of thinking and living. And as you guys already know, that most of these things, when it comes to the heart and cancer and several other diseases that we're getting into, chronic illness, 90 to 95% of them are not genetic. They're not because you have this inborn ticking time bomb, but it's the way that we're experiencing life, the way that we're doing life that's actually causing it. And yet, here we are statistically, 5 out of 6 Americans are dying of either heart disease or cancer if they die of a disease. And so if we statistically don't want to be a statistic, then we have to be living and thinking differently, yes? And I got into this because I suffered with a chronic health condition. I don't even like talking about it anymore because the reality is that instead of cursing the darkness, I'd rather light a candle. Does that make sense? I'd rather just focus on the good. I'd rather not talk about how bad medicine is anymore or corrupt or just how it's going down the wrong path, and how I'd rather create a new system, right? And that's what Max Living really is. And even though I went down a path and medically, some would say I was abused and nearly had 11 inches of my colon cut out. At the end of the day, there's a new system, and now I'm healthy, I'm whole, I'm on 0 medications. They told me if I had my colon cut out that I wouldn't be able to have kids. I've got 2 beautiful kids, or at least I think they're beautiful, right? Samuel and Isaiah. And I think about the fact that it's all because someone spoke up and introduced me to a new system. So today we're going to talk about kind of a new system of living and also work through kind of the logistics, because how many of you know it can be a little bit overwhelming when you start a new way of living, yes? It's almost like, where do I start? What do I do? And so we're going to work through some of the specifics of and logistics of that. Yeah? Yep. Okay. So I want to get into a couple things here, if I can get my clicker to work. One is kind of the purpose. You've started Max Living Care at this point. I want you to know who we are and what we stand for. As Max Living people, Max Living doctors, our purpose is to be the standard for natural health care, where everyone is empowered to live to their full potential. Everyone say everyone. Everyone. But who does that start with? It starts with you and I. It starts with our families. It's not out there. It's really in here. So if we can get a hold of this, this is our individual families. This is our spouses. This is hopefully our kids, if your kids are still under your care. Who has kids that are still under your kind of, they have to be obedient to you? Yeah, you guys? Anybody else have kids that are still under your care? Yeah, and so, maybe it might be grandkids that we influence at this point. But the reality is that if we're going to be the standard for natural health care, and we, it means collectively us, then we have to take ownership over this individually. And so you might have seen this. Who's already heard of the 5 essentials? Raise your hand if you've heard of the 5 essentials. Okay, so the 5 essentials, we call them the 5 essentials to max living for a reason, because they're not just good ideas, they're essential. Think of a plant. Like, you got a plant up here. Think of a healthy, thriving plant. What does a plant need to thrive? It needs just a couple of things. Needs sun, right? Most of them at least. Needs what? Water. Needs what else? Maybe good soil. Maybe not have toxic soil. Well, the same thing applies to us. We only need a handful of things to really thrive. One of them is mindset. How many of you know what you think about, you bring about, right? And what you think about, you create. So our thoughts literally change our brain. There's a book called Switching on Your Brain by Karen Leaf. That'd be a great one to pick up. And she talks about how your brain or your mind literally influences your brain and how it can rewire your entire brain and neurology. And so what we think about really does change our physiology. How many of you have heard of a placebo? What's a placebo? AKA what? Placebo is a sugar pill, right? How does a placebo work? Because you've seen placebo studies where the placebo actually works, yes? So how does a placebo work? Well, where does that have to have worked? You thought it was something good, you took it, and your physiology actually responded to it because of why? Because what happened in your brain. And so what we think about brings about, what we think about shapes our reality. And so we can't neglect that. And we're going to dive into this more, but what we put into our body matters. And right now it's totally neglected, as if it doesn't even matter what goes into your body, yes? And so what you put into your body actually becomes your body. So the food that you eat, the drugs that you take, the things that you put into your body becomes part of your body. When you think of it that way, it's more from a vitalistic perspective, because how many of you know the body is constantly trying to regenerate, recover, it's trying to repair, it's trying to heal itself constantly, yes? So if that's the case, then this matters a whole heck of a lot, the nutrients that are in our food or not in our food, whether it's depleted or not. I mentioned toxicity, the foods we eat, the drugs we take, household cleaners we're exposed to, the pots and pans that we cook on, the water that we consume, the toxins that we are now exposed to, whether that is from everything that we are exposed to or that we intentionally inject into ourselves. There are toxins all around us, and we have to be very aware of that because we are being bombarded with toxicity and being told that that's actually healthy, by the way. So we'll get into it. Chiropractic, so balanced nervous system. You should all understand what a balanced nervous system and the importance of a balanced nervous system is at this point. Yes? Yes. And then oxygen and exercise, how we move our body. We're designed to move our body, not have a sedentary lifestyle. But when you look at this and you look at the essentials, it's like, okay, where do I start? I kind of started with maybe getting adjusted. I've been eating well. I've been trying to minimize toxins. How do I prioritize this, and how do I go into kind of the next steps? And so how many of you already had your 5 essential consultation? Raise your hand if you have it or you've had it scheduled. So you sat down with maybe Dr. Phil Harris. Raise your hand if that's you. I know there's probably 6 of you. Yep. So ideally you sit down and get a more customized approach for your nutrition, toxicity, and just go through your individual goals and how they might align with what you might do with your customized nutrition. So that's what a 5 essential consultation is. And again, the 5 essential consultation, you go through a 5 essential lifestyle risk questionnaire too, in asking you all kinds of questions about your exposures, what you've been exposed to in your past that might lead you to the current state that you're in. The reason why that's been added to our practice over the years is because we've seen that, yes, someone could get adjusted and someone could maybe have a strong philosophy or mental clarity and a growth mindset. But if they're missing the other essentials, then what ends up happening is they only get to a certain point of healing and then they kind of plateau. So really, to get the most out of your care, to get the most out of your experience, really digging into the full experience of the 5 essentials, it's important. And having let's call it a wellness quarterback to kind of help guide you through that is really nice to have that. And so that's actually included in your care. You got what's called the Align Your Health book. How many of you got your Align Your Health book, right? If you didn't, make sure you see the front desk before you leave today. You're going to read through appendices A through G in your Align Your Health book. And then ideally you have a 7-day food diary filled out and you bring that to your consultation. If you have not scheduled your consultation yet and you want that consultation, make sure that you see the front desk before you leave. It's included in your care. You should all have a 5 essential consultation. We do this on purpose. It's an opt-in. It's not like mandated. We don't even right now charge for it. The reason why that is because we're going to block out a big portion of Dr. Phil's schedule and his time. And so if you want it, you can have it. But if you don't want it, we're not going to force it. Does that make sense to you? Okay, good. So that's why the 5 essential consultation exists. Starting with core chiropractic, the assumption is you understand the nervous system. The assumption is that you know that if I cut the nerve to your heart, how much broccoli do you need to eat in order to heal that? Right? So the assumption is you understand this, that the brain controls everything. It starts from above down, inside out. So for your heart to be beating, lungs to be breathing, if I cut your leg's going to heal. That's because everything is coordinated through this system right here, yes? And so the care of that and I'd say the maintenance of that is vitally important to overall health. It's also the most neglected system in healthcare right now. So for you to function at your absolute best, you need a absolute best functioning nervous system. Does everybody ever see how that works? Even your immune system is connected to your nervous system. If we had a fresh cadaver laying out right here, a fresh cadaver is what? Dead body. Thank you. All right, you guys are alive. You're with me. All right, dead body. If I cut the dead body's leg, does that leg heal, a dead body? No, why? But if I cut your leg heals. What's the difference? It's life inside of you that is going to heal you. And so the difference between you and dead body is actually the brain being on. And so the brain being on and connected is vitally important. And your nervous system, your spine actually protects that. And so when you look at the spine, remember, straight from the front, how many curves from the side? 3 curves, got it. So one in the neck, one in the mid-back, one in the lower back. And everything that you're doing when it comes to your wobble cushions, when it comes to your traction that you're doing at home, it's there to assist the correction of and the maintenance of your spinal health and spinal hygiene. And so there's 3 parts to this. And this is the part that I hope that you'll better understand of the why behind it. What I found over the years is that when a patient understands the why, they end up getting the how a lot better. When they understand the why, they end up incorporating this so much better. And this is maybe one that you might want to take a picture of. There's 3 components to optimizing and correcting the spine. One is the mix. What does that mean? You're mixing the spine. So you're loosening up the joints. You're loosening up the ligaments. That's the wobble cushion. How many of you have done the wobble cushion? Yeah. Okay. That's the traction unit. So when that's not actually that's actually a mixing exercise. It's to stretch the anterior longitudinal ligament. It's to get the fluid going up and down the spinal cord. So you do receive a better adjustment. But at home, that's actually to elongate and lengthen those ligaments. That's the mix component. The fix is the actual adjustment itself. It's when you get adjusted, whether it's arthrostim or manual or a combination, it's the adjustment to fix or get things moving in the right direction, unlock, and then set. And the set, and you might have seen this when you do the head weight, or you might have had a different configuration with a body weight or a hip weight or a posterior hip weight or something like that. The set is there to, and intentionally there to actually hold that into a better position, not only post-adjustment, but doing this at home too. And so part of the set is actually the home care rolls. So how many of you received your home care rolls already? Okay, so you'll be laying with, remember, which one is going underneath the lower back? Is it the big one or small one? Small. You got it, all right, you guys are on the right page. And so if you ever just kind of get mixed up or confused, or you see somebody out there that's doing it and you're like, are they doing it right or wrong, right? You can always go back and reference. These are updated videos on the website. Some people are given very intentional ways of doing it differently because they might have hardware in their neck, they might have had a lower back surgery. They might have gotten just in a different routine, and that's the way that they do it too over the years. We have patients who have been here a long time, but how it was prescribed for you is for you. It's not, if somebody else is doing it different, it's for various reasons that they might be doing it different. But how you're doing it, and also people are watching you intentionally to make sure that you're in the right frame and doing it the right way. So that's the balance of the nervous system, but I want to get into I think a huge component of our healthcare system that is, I want to call it broken, but it's just completely neglected. And it's this principle of nutrition. And when we say food by God versus food by man, that is a core principle of the Max Living Nutrition plans. So to make it very, very simple, what is food by God versus food by man? Because how many of you know there's a lot of diets out there? Can it be confusing sometimes? Overly confusing? Yeah, you go into we used to go into bookstores. You remember when we used to go into bookstores? right? You go through the section of the bookstore and it's like Barnes and Nobles, and there's sections and sections of literature and books about the fast food diet. You've got the paleo diet, you've got the Atkins diet, you've got the keto diet, and it's just gonna be overwhelming. Should I go vegan? Should I be a vegetarian, right? There's just so much misinformation out there. A fundamental principle that I feel like, and as Max Living doctors all over the country feel like, basing your healthcare decisions and nutrition decisions on a principle is so much easier than following the new fad, and has also worked way better. And one of those principles is food by God versus food by man. This is also one of these long lists that I'm not going to read to you, but is one that you might want to take a picture of, because it breaks down the difference as food by God versus food by man. Give you a couple examples. Food by God, grown, that's food grown in fertile soil. Food by man, food grown in depleted soil. Or GMO. What's GMO stand for? Genetic modified organism. So genetically modified food. So it's food grown bigger, stronger, faster, pesticide resistance many times. You have food by man that is a lot of times chlorinated or polluted with the tap water, as an example, as opposed to pure, clean spring or filtered water. Food by God, organic, local fruits and vegetables, local is important, versus pesticide-laden produce shipped from hundreds, thousands of miles away. Food by God, whole, maybe sprouted grain, cracked or soaked or fermented grain, versus very refined grain that's been run through the mill, very chemically and synthetically processed. What the white flour doesn't look anything like what you would ever see in nature, right? Many times it's been bleached. And so just understanding the difference of, okay, there's food by God versus food by man. What is the body going to tolerate better? What's been here in nature and what's been made for our bodies, or something that's been created and altered by man realistically in the last 50 to 100 years that our body doesn't recognize very well anymore? And think about that. If our body doesn't recognize a nutrient, what's it going to do with it? It's going to either fend it off, fight against it, or it's going to wall it off and try to isolate it to keep it from the rest of the cells within the body. So think about that. When your body does not recognize a nutrient, it only responds a handful of different ways. It can eliminate it. Thank God it can eliminate waste, yes? Thank God it can eliminate toxicity. But you can only fill that bucket up so much before it then overflows and then goes into the system. So you have your liver, your gallbladder, your kidneys. They're all systems of detoxification, but at some point you can only abuse the body so much before it's going to fight back and respond in a way that you might call it inappropriate, but it's actually an appropriate response. We call it disease. That's an appropriate response to a toxic-laden environment, is the body responding in a way that is going to elevate your blood pressure. It's going to raise your cholesterol. How could it not? It's inflammatory. So a couple principles here. So nutrition, where do you start? Here's where you start. Start with changing your meats and your dairy. Why changing your meats and your dairy first? Because those are the biggest offenders. Your meats are your highest inflammatory foods in general. Does that mean you don't eat meat? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying your meat, though, oftentimes is going to be inflammatory. Why? It's grain-fed beef most of the time. Grain-fed beef is going to be highly inflammatory. So our cows, when you go out and visit cows, what are they eating? Grass, right? So what happens when you feed them grain? They get bigger, fatter, faster. Yes? So what happens to us when we eat grain, by the way? Right? And so what that does is actually changes the composition of their omega-3s versus omega-6 in their body. And it creates a highly inflammatory, highly inflamed cow, and it becomes highly inflammatory when you eat it. And so grass-fed beef is just a non-negotiable, but when you look for grass-fed beef, it's got to be grass-fed and grass-finished. Because how many of you know they'll do grass-fed in the beginning, but then finish it with grain, because that's when it really matters to plump them up faster. But again, you're going to create a ratio of a sick cow, a highly inflamed cow. So changing your meats and dairy first. If you do dairy, ideally it's going to come from a non-pasteurized source. It's going to come from a 100% organic and 100% grass-fed source. Getting that here in Indiana, if you're actually going to do dairy that's not pasteurized, you're going to get it from a farmer's market, and it's going to be pet milk if you so choose. Most people choose to do alternative milk, meaning nut milks. So that's what kind of the nut milks? Name a couple of them. Almond milk, that's a popular one. What's another one? Coconut, cashew, yeah, macadamia nut. So you guys got it. What about soy milk?
No.
What? Okay, good. All right, educated group here. So why not soy milk? Who knows? GMO, yeah. So what are the 2 GMO crops you really have to be careful with? Corn and soy. Yeah, you guys got it. Yeah, so corn and soy. Soy is one of the most genetically modified foods. Can mimic estrogen within the body, becomes a phytoestrogen, and because it's mostly genetically modified, it's very difficult to get pure, unless it's fermented, soy milk that's going to be anywhere close to being healthy for you. It can alter your hormones and influence your hormones. Ladies, how much more do you want your hormones to be altered and messed with? And sometimes the men answer for you. So change your meats and dairy first. Get rid of your dirty dozen. So dirty dozen, this changes yearly. You can get on ewg.org and look up what the dirty dozen are and what the clean 15 are. It changes every single year. Make sure you're getting the dirty dozen out, and then add anything that you're not getting from food or that which you cannot get from food. I used to be of the philosophy that you get all your vitamins and minerals from food. And then I got educated about farming practices and regenerative farming and understanding how much we are ruining our soil, and our soil is so vastly depleted. How many of you know that our soil is very, very depleted now, right? And so we can't get the same mineral content or vitamin content that we used to be able to get from our food, even from a regenerative farm. If it's been a regenerative farm for a long time, you're going to get that. But a newly established, over the last 5 years, regenerative farm, you're still not going to get the soil mineralization that you should be getting that you once got, let's say 30 years ago. So adding in that which what you're not getting. I don't like to throw supplements at things and guess. We talk about testing instead of guessing, so you can have more of a customized approach instead of just throwing supplements at that. But there's certain supplements that basically everyone is deficient in, and we'll talk through some of those supplements. So changing your animal products first. We talked about grass-fed beef, free-range chicken. There is a term called cage-free chicken and then free-range chicken. So this can be confusing for a lot of people. You ever in the grocery store aisle and you're just kind of like, which one is better, right? And what do most people go with? The one that's what? Cheaper, right? So free-range versus cage-free. If you're a chicken, just think about this for a second. This is the way I think about it. Maybe you don't think about it like this. If you're a chicken, would you rather just be like not in a cage or free-range? Does that make sense? Yeah, so you'd rather be free range, because not in a cage just means that you could be still in an enclosed environment with thousands of other chickens, and what happens when one drops dead in the middle of them, the farmers can't get to them. Well, now disease and bacteria and everything else grows, and that's why they have to inject them with antibiotics many times, but a lot of times they're also injecting them with growth hormones. So understanding that free range is going to be better than cage free. Wild-caught fish, has become more, we have to be intentional with talking about this, because now you have fish that's grown in ponds, right? So now you have farm-raised fish. Well, think about this. Just logically right now, intuitively, salmon, do you want salmon to be swimming upstream in Alaska somewhere, growing their mussels, or some farm in Indiana where you have to keep lice from forming in that individual pond or that? Does that make sense? So you want free range. And in fact, when that salmon is grown in Indiana, in the southern part of Indiana, they have to actually inject it with food dye that makes it a salmon color for you to be tricked into buying it at the grocery store. So again, think about what you really want. Do you want 30 cents off of your salmon? Or, maybe it's $1.30. Or, do you want health? Do you want real food? And wild-caught fish is real food. Natural sources of dairy, we talked about this. We talked about getting rid of your dirty dozen. This changes every year. This is from 2020. You'll see that some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't. And what I mean by that is, with the dirty dozen, this is what you want to replace in your home. A lot of times these are more porous. They don't have a peel or any type of a layer on the outside. So let's say the Clean 15. some of these, like a kiwi as an example, you can kind of peel that off. And so that's something you can maybe get away with not buying organic, although all of this, when you test it, still, if it's conventional, is going to have some level of pesticide or herbicide that is found there. But if you're on a strict budget and you're like, hey, I have to decide here, well, the EWG's Dirty Dozen is definitely where you want to make sure you get rid of these things, because these are the most toxic when it comes to pesticides and herbicides. So again, this changes every year slightly. It's some of the same offenders every year. Strawberries is almost always one of the top offenders every single year on the Dirty Dozen list. So, people ask, okay, so where do I start when it comes to supplements? If you're not doing a multi right now, make sure you're doing a multi. That's an easy one to start with. There's so many men and women's multi. It should be distinct and different. Men's, you're going to get more, let's say, testosterone aiding nutrients. Your multivitamin should aid prostate health, as an example. That's a big one. Men's need versus women's needs are different. Women's multivitamin, you're going to talk about hormone restoration and hormone balance, breast health, ovarian health. Kids multi is going to look different from all three of them are going to look different. Kids multi is going to look different from an adult. Yes?
So the women's multivitamin, is it one fits all as far as ages go?
It is. And the reason why that is because there's certain nutrients that we all need, and women all need across the board. Now, what we do find with customized testing, individualized testing, certain women, especially post-menopausal, going to have a high need for like B vitamins, as an example, going to have a higher need for vitamin D a lot of times. So really knowing that about you, I think it's really important to know what our blind spots are, where our individual deficiencies are, so that we can supplement for our deficiencies and make sure we don't fall victim to some of these chronic illnesses that really are preventable if we have our deficiencies understood from an early age. Vitamin D is another one. So vitamin D3. So when you talk about vitamin D, everyone knows about vitamin D at this point. I mean, even medical doctors are talking about and prescribing sometimes vitamin D. What you'll find is that a lot of times they're prescribing synthetic vitamin D. You'll see it in the form of vitamin D2. And you got to be real careful with vitamin D2. The form that your body craves and needs and is made within it is vitamin D3. If you look at cancer rates and vitamin D, it's insane. This is a graph showing the serum vitamin D and then cancer rates. So what you'll see is that the higher the vitamin D, the lower the cancer rates are within that population. What's really interesting is that the RDA of vitamin D, RDA stands for what? Recommended daily allowance, will get you right in here, barely enough to prevent rickets. But if you're talking about any type of serum level vitamin D that has been found to prevent, let's say, breast cancer or heart attacks in men or multiple sclerosis or colon cancer or ovarian cancer, you're talking way higher than that. If you actually research the vitamin D standards and the reason why the RDA is where it is, the scientist was off by a factor of 10 when they originally made the recommendations. And so the 400 really should be 4,000. It's never been corrected. It's been brought to their attention. They say, well, it at least prevents rickets. And that's their response just about every time. And so if we're wanting to prevent something more than rickets, you need it in the range of between 5,000 and 10,000 to get to that range in the serum range of, above 40 up to 90. Get your vitamin D levels checked. It's really cheap to do it. Find out what your vitamin D levels are. You can go to any lab test now, walk in. You don't need a prescription to do that. It's not an expensive test. Find out what your vitamin D levels are, and then you'll know how to supplement and how much to supplement with. When it comes to your vitamin D, ideally you are taking a probiotic with it, because it's not what you take, it's what you absorb. When your gut is not healthy, you don't absorb the nutrients very well. When the gut is imbalanced with it's called dysbiosis, what happens is you're not absorbing that. And when I practiced down in Naples, Florida, it's a sunshine state, yes. You'd think everyone's vitamin D levels would be great, yes. They weren't. And even when those that were supplementing with vitamin D, you weren't seeing them in the ranges that you would expect to see with somebody in Florida. And so partly, yes, it's because of sunscreen, right? The other part is because our guts are just so imbalanced when it comes to our gut health because we take antibiotics, because we eat food that has eaten antibiotics or been injected with antibiotics. And so from an early age, this next generation is really going to be suffering, because what do they give them for just about every single ear infection? Antibiotic. They come out and they get colostrum in their mouth. What are they giving them? Antibiotics, right? What do they give them even preventatively when they have a fever now? It's antibiotics. And when you ask the people, like, why are you doing this? I don't understand. My child has a viral ear infection. It's been diagnosed, viral ear infection. Why are we giving an antibiotic? Do you know what the response is the vast majority of the time? We can't send you home with nothing. So literally it is a palliative thing that the nurse will give or the doctor will give so that you go home not empty-handed. So understanding that this is destroying our gut, antibiotic means anti-life, and it does destroy, maybe the bad bacteria that might perhaps exist in your gut, but it's also destroying all the good stuff too. Yes?
Speaking of the antibiotics, okay, I've had joint knee replacements,
Mm-hmm.
and so since 2015, and so every time I go to the dentist, they tell me that I need to take this antibiotic, So they asked me, at first I was doing it, then I started reading up on gut health and everything, and once I read it and became more knowledgeable, I stopped doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not honest when I tell them that I'm taking it, because I don't understand why I have to take it, because I'm going to get a cleaning or whatever
Sure.
every 6 months.
When you talk to, so she's asking about joint replacement, and when you talk to people who really understand this, they'll say antibiotic is the last thing that you would take if you've had a joint replacement. And so you might consider a biological dentist, just someone who thinks just a little bit different. Sometimes dentists are a personal decision, personal relationship you have with that person. But philosophically, if a provider doesn't align with you, it's time to kind of rethink that relationship, because stress is stress. And if every time you go in there, it's something that's going against your innate wisdom within your body or your gut feeling, or just going against your maybe religious convictions, maybe it's time to rethink who you're going to see all the time.
Will you mention that dentist that you said that you guys go to?
Yeah, Dr. So, and she's downtown. It's a great one. Just S-O, Dr. So, Mass Ave. So Mass Ave Dentistry, I believe. And if that's wrong, I'll correct that with you. Yeah. So another one that we see, so the vitamin D has a probiotic in it that's intentional. What we saw is that those who are taking probiotic, that's why vitamin D, honestly, from a corporate perspective, this is the reason why so many people take this. It's our best-selling supplement, because it has a probiotic. It's very unique. It's a kind of 2-in-1. The other thing is A, D, E, and K. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are all what? Fat soluble, right? So fat soluble. What you also see is a missing nutrient within our body, macronutrient, is fat. Why is fat a missing ingredient in our nutrition right now? And then therefore it's missing within our body is because of the what? Low-fat craze, low-fat diet, low-fat cottage cheese, low-fat milk. I once saw it's on the front package of the carrots, it said low fat and carrots. It's like, whoever bought those carrots because it said low fat, they got sold, right? So, it's a missing, but here's the thing about fat is not your enemy. But what you're told for the last 40 years now is fat makes you what? Fat makes you fat, right? You've been lied to if you've been told that. Fat does not make you fat. It's the wrong kind of fat. It'll be rancid, that'll make you fat. The wrong kind of fat will actually cause you to be sick and highly inflamed. The right type of fat will do the exact opposite. In fact, you need good healthy fat in to get good fat out and bad fat out, actually. And so our membrane, our cell membrane, there's a double lipid bilayer, 2 layers of fat around the cell. When you clog that membrane, guess what it's very hard for you to do is detox, to get bad stuff out of cells, to really get that cellular waste out of your system. Good healthy fats deflame the body and actually help that cell to get good nutrients exchanged from inside the cell to outside the cell. So cellular energy is so important, and fat plays a huge role in cellular energy in mitochondria. So good healthy fats. Now when you're talking about good healthy fats, this is where the big box stores really, I feel like, do people a disservice, is it cannot be heated. It can't be manufactured in a place that has heated or stored in a place that is either dip temperatures too cold or too hot. You find a lot of these end up being rancid. When, in this world of omega-3s, it's become a very saturated market with omega-3s, so they've done a really good job of trying to get the cost way, way, way down. But when you sacrifice quality for cost, what ends up happening is that fat can actually be rancid. And you know how many tests that we've done on our patients now and found that we're like, why are you so inflamed? And you look at what they're taking, it's actually coming from their supplements. It's like, how in the world did that happen? The thing that you were taking to actually help you is actually causing you to be more sick than not. So you want EPA, DHA, ideally from cold water source. You want to make sure that the smaller the fish, the better. Why the smaller the fish? Because the bigger the fish, the more what? Toxic, you got it. So that's everything that I'm showing you right now. It's with those types of brand standards in mind. So Optimum Omega, we need fats for the cell membrane. How about cholesterol? When it comes to heart disease, you're told cholesterol is your enemy. Listen, your liver did not make cholesterol. Let's put it this way. God didn't put something within you that's going to be made within you to then kill you, right? So cholesterol actually responds to inflammation. So think about this. If the fire is raging in a house and the firemen are going there to put out the fire, someone might come and look at the firemen in the fire and they might say, well, firemen, fire, firemen, fire. I'm putting two and two together here. These firemen are causing the fires. They're always here at the side of the fires. Well, that's exactly how cholesterol works. Cholesterol is made by your liver and it's transported to the inflamed tissue to kind of patch up the damage of the inflammation. And so you need healthy cholesterol. When you reduce cholesterol artificially, what happens is it hurts the brain, hurts the cell membrane, and these hormones that are cholesterol-based, well, then you end up causing hormone damage and hormone disruption there. And so show me somebody who's been on a statin medication for 5 years or more, and I'm going to show you somebody who's developing dementia. And so if you know somebody who's on a statin medication or who's artificially lowering their cholesterol, you need to teach them this, that there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. That whole term, good versus bad cholesterol, it's actually completely wrong. We've got a cardio workshop coming up in May. Bring them to the cardio workshop because it's all necessary. This is all necessary cholesterol, and we need fat to make sure our cholesterol is balanced. Getting rid of fat within the body will cause cholesterol to become imbalanced. Protein. So how do most people in America start off their mornings? What do we start off our mornings with most of the time? Bacon and eggs, coffee. What are some of the breakfast foods that a lot of people eat? Oatmeal, cereal, pastries, donuts, right? And so what are all of those that I just named? Carbs, right? Grains. And think about this. The most heavily sprayed crop oftentimes is actually grains themselves. They're using the Roundup material, glyphosate, it's a drying agent to dry out the grain. And so think about this. Not only is the grain highly inflammatory, it's fairly new to our systems. A lot of people get reactions to grain, even if they don't feel it or sense it initially within their body. It creates a level of an autoimmune response. But now you're dehydrating it with glyphosate. Glyphosate, there's billions of dollars lawsuits now that they're losing hand over fist because it's known to cause cancer. And so that's one of the challenges with grain. And so if we're starting our mornings off with, let's say, some level of grain, immediately that's turning to sugar almost right away. And if we're already just burning sugar most of the time and we're starting our day off with sugar, we're just feeding the flames of inflammation. And so what we want to really do is peel back and say, okay, I just came off of an extended fast because you just slept. The first thing you put into your body is what your body's going to hold on to and absorb. So the first thing that you put into your body after fasting is what your body's going to absorb the most. So what do we want to start our day off with? Is something that maybe is not what? Sugar, something that's going to turn to sugar. Yes? So what do we want to start our day off with is what? Protein. Yep, protein and ideally fat. So starting your day off in the morning, it takes 5 minutes. Just blend up a smoothie. It's very simple. You can take it on the go, and when it comes to nutrient rich and nutrient dense, you're going to get the most bang for your buck right away. So breakfast really just means break fast. What are you breaking your fast with? So whether your breakfast is at 6 a.m., 5 a.m., or if it's at noon, you're breaking your fast. Make sure you're breaking your fast with something that's nutrient rich. When you're looking at protein powder, whether it's plant protein, I like to vary mine. What I've noticed over the years is that whether it's my taste buds or my body just becomes so used, I don't know if you guys are like this, your body becomes so used to just one thing, right? And so I vary it. I do plant protein, I do grass-fed protein, I do Pure Path, which that's a bone broth protein, and just kind of cycle through and change it seasonally. But when you do a whey protein, got to be grass-fed, grass-finished. Perfect plant protein, you got to make sure there's no anything been sprayed. When you talk to supplement manufacturers, it's amazing where they get their raw materials and how many corners they cut. So you got to make sure the raw materials are organic and they've been tested for metals, because a lot of these things have metals in them too, heavy metals. And so we'll talk about that. And Max Greens is a good pick-me-up in the afternoon. It's 34 vegetables and fruits. It's an enzymatic blend. It's pretty awesome. That's kind of my pick-me-up instead of coffee in the afternoon. How many of you know coffee might be healthy in the morning? It's debatable, but it's definitely poison this afternoon. Anybody like not with me there? Okay. Yep. I'm sorry for those of you who are really into coffee, by the way. So you'll see in the advanced plan, in the Align Your Health book, you'll see what's called the advanced plan. And how many of you gotten to this point, advanced plan? Raise your hand if you've been there already. Good. So a handful of you, hopefully you've had your 5 central consultations, so you're getting there. So the advanced plan, no grains. This is kind of the general rule of thumb with the advanced plan. No grains, yes, gluten-free, but gluten-free is a big term, meaning there's not that gluten within that food. But that does not mean healthy. There's a lot of things that are gluten-free that is not actually healthy. Look at what they're replacing it with a lot of times. I've seen aspartame in things that are gluten-free. That's a neurotoxin. So just because it says it's gluten-free, that's a marketing ploy to many times to get you to buy it. So you're getting rid of grains. You're replacing them with things that are life-giving. So you're loading up on healthy fats, not damaged fats, naturally raised animal proteins. So it's everything that we just talked about. And then only low sugar fruits and berries. So what are low sugar fruits and berries?
Blackberry.
Yeah, raspberries, blackberries. You've got all the berry family is going to be low glycemic index. We say berries, not cherries, because why would you do the advanced plan? There's a lot of indications for this. I want to read this for you, because when I say low glycemic fruits, sometimes people say, well, hey, I know that X thing is good for me, whether that's a banana or that's a pineapple, or there's really healthy properties of beets. Listen, I get it. I understand it. Our body needs a break from the onslaught of sugar just for a period of time. And there's some indications for why you would do the advanced plan. If you've had high triglycerides, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, if you've been diagnosed with inflammatory condition like arthritis, or you've been told that you have high leptin, which is also insulin resistance or a form of weight loss resistance. High blood sugar, low blood sugar. You've been told you have toxicity. You got to open up those pathways of detoxification. Allergies, I said arthritis. Autism spectrum disorders, cancer. What does cancer love? Sugar, thank you. Chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. Some of these new diseases, by the way, like multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, some of these conditions that you're just now seeing pop up in the last 20 years, you got to ask yourself why. What they do is they'll blame it on genetics. Our genetics haven't changed in thousands of years, but what has changed is the way we live. So you've got to ask those questions of why is this popping up and what kind of genes do I want to pass down. Heart disease, all forms of heart disease, whether that's atherosclerosis, plaquing of the arteries, whether that's high blood pressure, whether that is high cholesterol, the advanced plan is going to be right for you. So digestive dysfunction, whether that's irritable bowel, whether it's Crohn's, whether it's ulcerative colitis, obesity, or you've got, you're genetically intolerant to grains. There are certain people who know that about themselves. You might have been diagnosed with what's called celiac. How many of you have heard of celiac disease? Most of us are genetically intolerant to grains, by the way. Whether we express that symptomatically or not is different from person to person. ADD, ADHD, mental emotional disorders, or you're on a medication of any kind, that's all indications for the advanced plan. So a couple of just basic changes for the advanced plan is change out your sugar and carbs. So you're getting rid of the grains and sugars, anything that turns to sugar except for the berries. A couple of exceptions here, grapefruit and Granny Smith apple. Which one's the Granny Smith apple? What color is it? Green, yeah. So it's kind of tart, really, like compare it to a red apple. What would you like to have like 12 of? Probably not the Granny Smith apple, probably the red one, right? So innately you kind of know, like it's more tart, it's gonna be low glycemic. Grapefruit's in that same category. Protein, replace that conventional protein sources with natural protein sources that we talked about. Fats, getting rid of the bad fats, replace them with good ones. It's actually fairly simple, but you'll start to notice, especially if you're a sugar burner, that you're gonna start to notice a switch being flipped within you. And right now you might crave, let's say, carbs, or if you crave like potatoes at night or potato chips, or how many of you after dinner, you crave something like some kind of snack in order to sleep well, you crave some type of snack, or midday around 2 o'clock, you're like, man, I kind of need something to keep me going here. You might be a sugar burner. That's someone who relies on sugar for energy. Your body's not very good at burning fat, so that means you're not fat adapted yet. And when you're not fat adapted, you tend to store fat instead of burn the fat. And so that's why you regularly need sugar for energy, and that's why a lot of times you have these uncontrollable cravings. You can't even sleep at night unless you snack before you go to bed. So you might be a sugar burner. Raise your hand if you know somebody who might be a sugar burner. Okay, yeah. Fat burners, you're going to rely on fat for energy. You're going to burn fat in your sleep. You're going to extract more energy from less food because fat is your body's preferred source of energy with double the calories. So you're burning, does that mean you are doing the ketogenic diet and you're living off ketone bodies? The answer to that is no. Ketogenic diet and living off ketone bodies is actually not sustainable long term. Do we sometimes, let's call it, prescribe that for certain conditions and certain people in order to boost them and get them out of that situation? Yes, we do. Do you live off ketone bodies forever? The answer to that is you can't. And so the advanced plan is sustainable. People ask, how long am I on the advanced plan? You go until. And what does that mean? Is until you reach your outcome. So for you, if that goal is to, maybe it's that reverse that diabetes, well, you go until you reach your outcome. But you eventually get to a place where you do what's called the core plan. Core plan is where you're going to incorporate healthy grains that are suitable for the body. It's going to be more of an approach that's not only sustainable for a lifetime, but kids can live off the core plan. So it's all fruits, it's all vegetables. So that's when it basically comes down to food by God versus food by man. That's the core plan. When you get to that point, you're living well. You reach your goals, you've reached your weight loss goals, or maybe you've reached your health outcome. You're not dealing with the achy joints anymore. Mostly global achy joints is a metabolic disorder. I'm going to say that again. Global achy joints, that's in multiple joints, is going to be a metabolic disorder or metabolic dysfunction. So if you have global achy joints, that means there's something on the inside that's not right. It's dysfunctional. And again, when you test people, you can see this very clearly, but it's very much related to a metabolic disorder. So when we talked about your mindset, listen, we can't, I've seen just the difference of people who believe themselves to be sick, have been told that they're going to be sick, been told that the newest, and this isn't just the current situation with COVID. I remember with Zika, I went to the 2016 Rio Olympics, and back then it was all about Zika, and they almost canceled the Olympics because of Zika. And then there was the Ebola. Do you remember this? You can just keep kind of going back in history and just kind of seeing how there's a new way. The people who are fearful of every germ and every bacteria and every virus, and people are told that they're genetically broken, it's kind of all the same category, that there's just this underlying fear, right? And we all have it on the inside. We all have this underlying fear of death at some level. But when that really dictates our life and we make decisions based off of that, how many of you know we don't make good decisions based out of fear? We just don't make good decisions. And so this understanding of having a growth mindset, believing you can be well, believing you can change, believing your body can change, those people tend to get the best results. So if we're talking about getting the most out of your health and healthcare, this strong belief in yourself and your ability to change is important. And I'll tell you this, it starts with winning the morning. How do you start your day? How do you wake up in the morning? What are you reading first thing in the morning, right? How many of you know what you put in your face and what you're reading first thing in the morning is going to actually dictate your day? right? And so, a lot of people, what they start their day off with is what? They pick up their phone and turn off their alarm, they swipe, and what do they seeing first thing? The news, or just whatever pop-up is on there. And whether that's a text message from somebody that they either like or don't like or whatever. It's just, I would argue that there could be a different perspective with how you start your day that's going to cause the next 10 years to look really different for you. And so the Max Living approach here it's called winning your morning, and it starts with a war plan. A war plan is that you don't let your day come to you, that you own your day by starting it off with intention. So you map out what your day is going to be, and you follow your schedule. You are very systematized in your approach to making sure that these are the things you're getting done, but more than that, these are the things that I'm allowing myself to get exposed to in my thought life. Does that make sense? So for you, that might be waking up with your Bible, your other readings, whatever you're reading, but it's pouring back into yourself and also getting into that meditative state, and that state where you're in deep intellectual thought. And Carolyn Leaf's book that I just mentioned, she talks about how deep intellectual thought actually changes the shape of your brain. So how important is that to start your morning off with that? Deep intellectual thought. And again, then you have a new frame on what some people call stress. We don't call it stress management, we call it peace management, because many times stress is also a lack of peace in our lives, right? So joy, hope, peace, these are all things that, you really get in the kingdom, is my perspective. How many of you know we're supposed to move and we're not moving? It's as simple as that, is it not? The thing is, what was been shut down in the last 12 months or so is you can't hardly get into the gyms anymore. But the good news, you don't need a gym to actually get in the best shape of your life. Right now, I'm currently training for what's called Race the Wolf. This is a crazy thing. It's 50K through the mountains of Idaho, and so it's 31 miles. It's called ridge running in the mountains of Idaho. It's insane. But they shut down the gyms, so what are we going to do? Find something else to do, right? So you can get in the best shape of your life, and it does not take racing the wolf and ridge running in Idaho. You can literally, in your home, get in amazing shape. And we could have this thing called Max T3. And what that means, it's that there's 3 T's. There's time, tempo, and type. And it's vitally important to our bodies to breathe hard, to sweat, to push our bodies to and get a higher heart rate for a period of time. It's called high intensity interval training. Anybody heard of high intensity interval training? Surge training, burst training. It has many different names, but I find people who have not breathed hard and sweat in months, sometimes even years. And so ideally, for our hormones to be balanced, if somebody's coming into me with hormone imbalance, one of the first things that we start talking about is this right here. This is the fastest way to kickstart your hormones. The fastest way to influence your hormones is by getting your body moving. And again, it can be as simple as doing this in your living room. So Max T3, you can get online, Max T3. It's really simple. We have videos all over the place. If you can't find it, you can email me, but it's not for lack of it being on there. It exists. And again, you can get in the best shape of your life in just minutes a day, as easily as 12 minutes a day. And some people are skeptical when I say that, but how many of you ever done a burpee? Anybody ever done a burpee? You know what that looks like? It's where you go all the way down, touch your chest, get all the way back up, and jump towards the ceiling, right? Just do 100 of those, and it'll take you about 10 minutes. I guarantee you're not going to argue with me about 12 minutes a day anymore, because again, it's hard to do that. So lastly, as we kind of wrap up here, is I want to talk to you about minimizing toxins, because this isn't everything. It's food we eat, drugs we take. I mentioned household cleaners. We've got to stop toxins at our source. Everyone wants to talk about the detox system, and the detox system is awesome. I love it. It's so helpful. Whoa! Hopefully, well, that one's going to go on a sale next. Is a cell and body detox. It's amazing because it's intercellular glutathione, which is, how many of you know what glutathione is? Yeah, so glutathione is actually your body's natural antioxidant, which antioxidants help to fight what? Disease, free radicals in general, which free radicals turn into cancer. Okay, so intercellular glutathione, or really glutathione precursors, and then it helps to draw the toxins out of the cell and then carry them through the colon. One of the problems with traditional detoxes is that there's not 2 parts, so you're not getting the toxins to be bound and then be pulled from the system. That's why they get clogged up in the colon, Right? That's why people go through detox challenges a lot of times, and that's why we also get sick colons. And so the detox system helps with both of these, but what I often tell people is that let's not talk about that before we talk about where it's coming from. You got to stop it at its source first. You're not just detoxing to retox. If you don't fix this part here, all you're doing is cycling them out. And when you test people and you do toxicity testing along with it, you see they're being exposed from a lot of different sources, from industrial cleaners, or maybe it's from, again, the pesticides or herbicides, or oftentimes it's these little things they just don't know that they're doing on a regular basis because of industry and because of poisoning, really. And so stop them at their source first before even talking about detoxing, and then you can get into a cleanse or a detox. Cleansing versus detoxing. Cleanse is lighter, detox is actually more targeted and specific to pull it out. Cleanse you can do forever. You can do that because you're exposed to toxins daily, and you can cleanse to get those pathways of detoxification open on a regular basis. So that's something you can do just on a regular. This is targeted approach, whether it's 30, 60, 90 days, you're not going to do this one forever. You don't want to do binders forever because it can, it's not necessary, and also you can get into sometimes mineral depletion doing that too much. So this is targeted, it's fast, it works great. This is going to be more lighter, especially if you know you've done a detox before. Anybody ever done a detox before? And maybe you get detox symptoms. It's probably because you haven't started to open up those pathways first, and you need a more light approach first to open up the liver, gallbladder, kidneys, lymph system first before you get into it. And again, I keep mentioning testing. That's what Max Metabolics is. I mean, that's, when we get into more customized approach, again, you start with the 5 essential consultation. If you've not had that done, make sure you get that. But that's when you get into more of a targeted approach. We know exactly, okay, here are the markers of dysfunction. Dysfunction turns into disease. We know that part. So let's stop it at dysfunction instead of wait until disease comes up. Because how many of you know if we wait for, what's our traditional response right now in healthcare is to wait for what to show up? Disease and symptoms. And then what do? Treat the symptoms and disease. And then what do? Do we ever go back and say, get it at its source? Do we ever go back and say, hey, let's rewind this and find out what caused it? No. So why not do that right now and target it now? And that way we don't end up there in crisis mode, and now we have to think about crisis management, drugs and surgery. And so that's the whole reason for Max Metabolics. Get it at its source. We recognized a long time ago we needed a wellness quarterback and more of a detailed and customized approach to our nutrient needs. And the more that you get into this metabolic testing and understand that vitamins and minerals and these pathways oftentimes are way off and even clogged, because it's not based off of how you've been living the past 6 months. It's based off how you've been living when? Really your whole life, right? So I wish you could change things in 6 months and it'd be perfect, yes? But that's not always how it works. So that's more of the customized testing. The lab that we work with, this is it's called functional testing, this type of testing. It's way different than the traditional medical tests because you're testing functional tests. You're not just testing like B vitamins as an example. You're looking at the pathways that would make B vitamins absorb B vitamins, and you're looking at the pathways that are going to end up there. So it's not testing B12. You're not testing like vitamin D. You're looking at all the different pathways that are going to end up there. So if there's a dysfunction upstream somewhere, you're going to end up seeing that. So the lab describes it as way more advanced than traditional medical tests. There are MSRP on the metabolomics test, this one right here. You get it in a box, you take it home, you do a blood prick, you urinate in a cup. They'll show you how to do it. And then you turn it in, you send it into the lab. You get all the markers, all the diagnoses, everything that's going to, and then we sit down with you and go through a customized approach on changing that. They want us to charge $2,004. That's the MSRP on the metabolomics test. I've got colleagues who do that. I mean, they make their money on the testing. I just think all my patients need it, right? And so we've worked really hard with volume discounts to get it all the way down to where it is right now. It's at $750 for a Max Living patient. So if you're a Max Living patient, that's the cost to it. At the 5 Essential Equipping class, it's only $650. So we give you a coupon today. It's good for a week. If you want the metabolomics testing and go through the customized recommendations, it's $650 to do that. And that's for you and family too. So if you know anybody who's over 2 years old in your household, And again, if they're a max living patient, anyone over 2 would benefit from that. And when you put in the age range, you're going to get customized. You mentioned age, like customized recommendations for your age. Everything, the values are custom to your age. So you know how like an RDA on a vitamin is just specific across the board? This is specific to your age and also your sex, so male or female. Everything we talked about, 15% off, so everything that we talked about today. But I really feel like this with our growing network of doctors. How many of you know that it can almost feel exhausting right now with the current state of the world, right? Almost kind of feel everything that we're doing kind of feels like going against the grain. Does that make sense to you? Like going against the grain, like against standard of healthcare, against everything else that's out there. But I feel like we need to stop thinking about it as going against something, but moving toward something, right? Moving toward real healthcare, moving toward real transparent, humanistic way of thinking about our bodies, about collectively how we're going to pass down genetic material, the generations behind us, but moving towards real health. And I feel like when we position it in that way and understanding that my health is my own responsibility, it's no one else's responsibility, and when I take ownership of this, I know I'm going to get better outcomes. At the end of the day, I feel like we end up with not only better results, but collectively just a better vision for humanity. So appreciate you guys coming tonight. I hope this added value. If you've not gotten your 5 Essential consultation or you've not signed up for it, make sure you see the front desk before you leave here tonight. If you want to jump straight into the metabolomics, make sure you see them and they can help you get your kit, take it home, and they'll tell you what to do next. All right, thanks guys.
Thank you.